falling hold down. Just wait a second. I'll let you know. You let me know. I'll let you know.
Phones, are they on vibrate
silent?
mode?
Yes, they are.
In case somebody calls you urgently.
Hivi kama ukiwa una moderate huko usemagire aha kama ambavyo unasemaga Clubhouse au Twitter Spaces.
You know,
you haven't noticed on Twitter Spaces
you told me not to.
But when you moderate hapa nikikusikiza, you don't do that.
I do it.
Do you?
Yeah.
I've never noticed that.
Maybe because I don't have the microphone.
Nitakuuliza.
Maybe because I didn't have the microphone. So I do it. It's how I
Respond, like show that you're present. Okay.
through this thing. I'll use this. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think we should get going. You are the privileged and the lucky, or maybe unlucky, few who are able to be here present. But I am told that we're also live streaming. Is that correct? Or at least somewhere online, in the ether, in the cloud. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this 17th Tanzania Economic Update launch of the World Bank's semi-annual report. I always look forward to these because I find them incredibly insightful and well-written and well-researched. And I think this one is a particularly important one, looking at empowering women, a word we shall discuss, Carol, expanding access to assets and economic opportunities in Tanzania. So it's good to have you all here. I shall introduce the panel at the right moment. But right now, I'd like to welcome the World Bank's country director, my friend Mara Warwick, to welcome us all and to give us a bit of an overview. Mara, welcome. I think you might need.
Development, gender, women, and special groups, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, members of the press. I'm delighted to announce today the launch of the 17th edition of the Tanzania Economic Update, entitled Empowering Women, Expanding Access to Assets and Economic Opportunities. As you are aware, the World Bank produces economic updates in many of our member countries around the world, including in Tanzania. Launched twice a year, each edition of the Tanzania Economic Update independent assessment of the current economic performance and outlook accompanied by a special topic chapter which focuses on a contemporary issue important to realizing Tanzania's development aspirations. Released in July last year, the special theme of the 16th Economic Update focused on transforming tourism in Tanzania toward a sustainable, resilient, and inclusive sector following the major negative impacts of the pandemic. Today, in line with Her Excellency President Samia Suluhu Hassan's forward-looking strategic vision on empowering the women of Tanzania to reach their full potential, the 17th edition shows that gender equality remains essential to guaranteeing economic opportunities and an inclusive economic recovery, while also ensuring Tanzania's successful transition to middle-income status. A key purpose of our Tanzania economic updates is to stimulate public debate on the economy and on the featured development themes. As on previous occasions, we are honored today to have a panel of eminent practitioners and thought leaders to participate in the discussion. And I would personally like to thank Dr. Choloff and the panel for their presence here today. So let me take a few minutes to highlight some of the key messages and recommendations of this report. First, the economic in 21 peak. New across Sub-Saharan Africa 20 very fully vaccinated against COVID-19 and the possibility of new restrictions. In August, Tanzania launched a COVID-19 vaccination program, but more than anticipated. Only 3 million vaccinations program is crucial for underpinning a international travel and tourism, which together account for more than 1/4 of the country's total exports. Frequency article does that economic activity in Tanzania is gradually recovering. Accommodation and restaurants, mining, and other sectors sharp in quarterly GDP during the third quarter of 2021. Moreover, leading indicators such as cement production, electricity generation, goods and exports, non-fuel goods imports, telecommunications, mobility, and tourist arrivals all improved in 2020. Activity in most sectors still remain at pre-pandemic levels. Nevertheless, the preliminary findings from a recent telephone survey suggest that employment among household returned to January 2020 level mid-2021. These positive developments, the World Bank estimates a real GDP growth rate of 4.3%, and a GDP per capita rate of 1.3% in 2021, following a contraction of in 2020. Meanwhile, the national growth rate is estimated to have declined marginally from 27.1% in 2020 to 27% in 2021. The risks to Tanzania's economic outlook have moderated. The recovery continues to hinge on external development and domestic health policies, and continued support to the private sector. Real GDP by 5% in 2022, along with its long-run potential growth rate of about 6%. An accelerated domestic program, increased regional trade and cooperation, and policy reforms designed to improve the business environment and support the growth of the private sector mitigated downside risks. But the emergence of new coronavirus variants, reduced capital flows, elevated debt levels, persistent inflationary pressure, and supply bottlenecks do continue to threaten the projected recovery. Pandemic response in the short term, while continuing recovery over the medium to long term. Investment, supporting employment-intensive and resilient recovery, and expanding available fiscal space while maintaining debt sustainability. In line with the conclusions of previous editions of the Tanzania Economic Update, achieving these development will require the government to advance, strengthen, and expand its existing efforts to support struggling firms while implementing structural reforms to address long-standing private investment, women's access to economic opportunities. Authorities have a track record of sound macroeconomic management, but further reforms to revenue policy and administration, public expenditures, and debt management will be necessary to create adequate space to increase priority social spending and investment without jeopardizing fiscal sustainability. Which brings me to the issue of empowering Tanzania's women. The special section of the 17th Tanzania Economic Update focuses on economically empowering. We believe this is important now more than ever, as women's empowerment plays a pivotal role in achieving a strong, inclusive, and post-COVID crisis. Now is the time for Tanzania to act. Excellency, President Samia Suluhu Hassan has set out a forward-looking strategic vision for empowering Tanzanian women. The Tanzania Development Vision 2025 also emphasizes gender equality in its social and economic dimension. Past years, Tanzania has greatly expanded women's economic opportunities, and this in turn has contributed to the country's sustainable growth and poverty reduction, helping the country move to lower middle status in 2020. A growing share of women have entered salaried employment, and the female labour force participation rate rose from 67% in the year 2000 to 8% in 2019, well above the average for sub-Saharan Africa of 63%. Likewise, the share of women engaged in unpaid agricultural work fell 78% to 64% between. And yet, despite impressive gains, several factors continue to hold women back from full participation in the workforce and from achieving their full potential. Tanzanian women continue to face serious constraints in their economic productivity. Compared to only 8%. Count compared to 50%. And women are engaged in wage employment compared to 48% of men. Cents for every dollar earned by men. Tanzania work for agriculture, and yet the gender gap in agricultural productivity between 20 and because women lack access to male family labor and to agricultural implements and pesticides. Women's ability to participate in the workforce is further constrained by inadequate access to child services and low levels of enrollment in upper secondary education. Estimates suggest that closing the conditional gender gap in agricultural productivity lifts approximately 80,000 out of poverty percent and
have not yet been allocated resources. Therefore, the ministry urge and invite all of you in this launch as one opportunity to support the implementation of the strategic goals of this new ministry. Dear participants, once again, I would like to thank you all, especially Dr. Marwa, for inviting me to share this success story today for this timely Tanzania economic update, and look forward to deepening our collaborations to help further women's economic empowerment and ensure women full and equal integration into the economy of this country. In line with what is articulated in the Tanzania Development Vision 2025, we are aiming for a gender-inclusive workforce where economic activity are not identified by gender. Dear participants, with these few, if not many remarks, thank you all for attending this remarkable launching. To declare our occasion is officially launched, and I will be available throughout to grasp what is important for us to work on it as a government. Thank you for your attention, and thank you all. It's a pleasure indeed.
Thank you very much. I was going to ask you for your speech, and I noticed it's on your tablet. I know, Carol, there you are. Thank you so much, Madam Permanent Secretary, Dr. Zainab Chaula. Really, I'll send you my email so you can send me the speech. It has some nice figures in it. You talked about Mara giving facts and figures. You had 91 billion to 900 women. 91 billion to 900 women, that's a lot of money per woman, isn't it? Or is it 900 women groups? Ah, okay. See, that's why I wanted your speech. I don't want to misquote it. So let us dive right into the report that you have so graciously launched for us. And I'd like to thank you. I think let's go straight into the presentation. Karibu, Doctor. We'll move the podium so you're not so squashed here.
Thank you very much, Aida. So let me remind you what happened in 2020. And the big message from this slide is because of the global pandemic, per capita GDP in Tanzania contracted. And of course, I mean, you know, we measure per capita GDP by taking the GDP growth and the population growth rate, and the difference is what we call per capita GDP. And the graph on the left, it shows you the trend since 1991 to 2023 in terms of the GDP growth, population growth, which is the blue line, and of course GDP growth, per capita GDP growth, which is the red line, and the bars are GDP growth. So if you look at the graph, so what we are saying in this slide is, of course, Tanzania avoided recession in 2020 because many countries in the world normally went into recession, but we didn't. But of course, the GDP growth slowed a lot. We moved from 5.8% growth rate in 2019 to 2.0 in 2020. Of course, I mean, the big issue was the tourism sector, which was mostly severely hit, but of course, the export-related sectors, which were also negatively affected. And as a result, GDP per capita $1.9 a day, increased from 49.3% in 2019 to 50.4% in 2020. And of course, I mean, the big issue was the households who are relying on self-employment and informal micro-enterprises we saw it in urban areas. So the urban poverty was the one which was driving the numbers when it comes to poverty increase. Now, in this slide, it's a kind of promising news in the sense that things are changing from 2021, and what we are showing there is, I only picked these three, I mean, in the report you will see more than this, but what we just picked is the mobility, tourism, and trade. And what we are saying, when it comes to mobility, we are saying mobility is now rising. I mean, starting from somewhere maybe from mid-July last year. And of course, it's more on the recreation and retail places. People are moving, I'm seeing now a lot of movement towards those places, but also in the workplace as well. And of course, on tourism, we are also seeing some recovery in tourism. Of course, the chart shows you tourism arrivals and the travel earnings, which is basically driven by the numbers in terms of the tourism. And of course, we also seen the trade rising as well. And there, what we just picked is the export of goods and services, and investment and things like that. So we are seeing all this recovering, but of course, as Mara pointed out before, not yet to pre-pandemic levels. And see the where it was before the pandemic. Now, the other good news, which I think is very important to remember for Tanzania is, at least Tanzania has an advantage. The market is sound and can support stronger for recovery and more private sector-led growth. And then what we are trying to show, we are showing inflation, we are showing fiscal balance, and we are showing reserves, and we are showing external balance. Normally, very important in the sense that, I mean, the monetary policy normally intends to have stability in the inflation. So when you have adjusting the monetary policy in order to support your growth. But also, when we look at the fiscal balance as well, we are seeing the fiscal deficit has averaged somewhere around 2% of GDP or slightly higher than 2% of GDP, which is also very low. They say that it can allow you to expand a little bit the fiscal deficit in order to create more space, in order to 2021, somewhere July 2021, then you see a lot of it is being financed by external loans and to general government, but not much in terms of the foreign direct investment. And what you can see from the bars as well, the blue bars normally are showing the foreign direct investment. You see some kind of declining trend. And I think that one is something which we also need to look at it in order to make sure that at least also that needs to go up, which is part of what we encourage in terms of investments. Of course, now, looking forward, what we are saying, uncertainty still remains very high. But of course, what we are saying, I mean, the recovery or the pace of recovery will depend on external developments, domestic health policies, as well as private sector policies. What we do on those fronts, but of course, external environment, global environment is also very, very important. If we have positive development there, we are good. So the chart we are showing there, you see the heavy line, the black line. It's what is line in terms of assuming all those things happen in the positive direction for Tanzania. Global developments are good, health policies, private sector policies are good, then we're probably going to have the growth rate of GDP of around 5.4 in 2022 and then 5.9 in 2023. But of course, it can change. What the bar shows, I mean, the chart shows you, it can change. If we do a lot in terms of those policies, then we're probably going to get a higher growth rate. But if we don't do enough on those, we are also likely going to fall below the 5.4 we are saying. So it's important to recognize that we are assuming a lot will happen in terms of policies to support private sector, a lot in terms of domestic health policies, but favorable external developments. So the evolution of pandemic and the vaccination program globally and domestically will play a large role in terms of future growth. What happens to the pandemic in global and internal is very, very important to take into consideration when we are determining the future. But of course, we are also saying continued vaccination progress, improve the regional trade and cooperation, and policy reforms to improve business environment are important to support inclusive and resilient private sector-led growth. So business environment, I think it's a big issue. We need to do a lot in terms of improving business environment in order to attract private investment and the like. Of course, we also say that risk include risk to whatever we are projecting will include the emergence of new coronavirus variants, subdued private capital flows, inflationary pressures, and supply bottlenecks. So those are the risks which may counter our growth trajectory in terms of the numbers we are projecting. In terms of the policy recommendation, we continue to emphasize what we have been saying in the previous two economic updates. And of course, what we are saying, I mean, the policymaker should strengthen its pandemic response in the short term, but also laying the groundwork for private sector-led recovery and inclusive growth over the medium term. And of course, we say the priority policy areas should aim at saving lives by expanding, preventing, detecting, and treat COVID while enhancing the transparency of the data and public information, health information. We are also saying the second one is we need to protect the poor and the vulnerable, and by this we are also suggesting that we need to continue building resilient and inclusive social protection system while protecting and empowering women. And third, we need our policies to support jobs, business recovery and growth. So that whatever cents we are spending We are getting value for it. Of course, we need to continue mobilizing domestic revenue in a manner that supports private sector as well. Some numbers there as well in terms of the debt and the debt service. So we need to make sure that whatever we borrow, it supports growth and export orientation in this economy. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. There's one thing you mentioned there on that slide of potential economic growth for the country. And some of the uncertainties were to do with COVID, to do with global recovery. I think in the report it talks about supply chain constraints. Putin was not included. And that's a major uncertainty, isn't it? There's a wonderful report about using scenarios to try and, for the IMF, try and understand how to respond to particular crises. And the IMF says we live in a tuna world, okay, not a tuna sandwich, a tuna world, T-U-N-A. T, turbulent, very turbulent. U, unpredictably uncertain. Not only is it uncertain, but the uncertainty itself is unpredictable. N is novel, these new challenges, everything from social media and artificial intelligence to, well, new in this generation, 77 years ago was the last time there was a war in Europe. And A, ambiguous. We don't know how it all ends. So in this tuna world, we might have to update our economic update for Tanzania in a few months, won't we? So let's just keep that in mind as we also try to think about domestic policy making, especially when talking about expanding access for economic opportunities to women. So I'd like now to turn your attention again to the screens, and we look at part 2 of the report. And there will be a short video followed by a presentation by sector leader of the World Bank, Ya Opong. So let's watch the video first, and then I'll invite Ya for her presentation.
Wanaume walio wengi wanaishi kwa namna ya fikra za mfumo dume. Hasa mfumo dume ule ndio unaoathiri wanaume kuwaona wanawake kwamba bado hawawezi.
Mila na desturi pia zinamkandamiza mwanamke,
kwamba wanawake wanakuwa hawana haki ya kumiliki ardhi.
Jambo la kwanza naweza kusema kuna jambo kubwa la urasimishaji au formalization ya biashara, ambao wengi kwanza wanakuwa hawajui au hawana uwezo.
Kama vile mteja anaweza kuja kuchukua kitu hapa akakulipa jioni au asipe siku mbili. Hizo ndio changamoto zenyewe.
Wanaume kwa asilimia kubwa wana nafasi ya kupata taarifa, kukutana kwenye maamuzi, lakini kwa wanawake vikundi vyao vya kiujasiriamali kimsingi havina taarifa sahihi za kuwawezesha kupiga hatua katika biashara zao ndogo ndogo.
Tunapenda basi serikali ituwezeshe tupate mikopo midogo midogo.
Ili mwanamke na kundi kubwa la wanawake waweze kunyanyuka, lazima wawepo katika ngazi za kufanya maamuzi.
Mwanamke ambaye anafanya maamuzi ana uwezo wa kufanya vitu vikubwa zaidi kuliko ambaye hafanyi maamuzi mpaka afanywe na mwanaume.
Moja ya eneo kubwa ambayo wanaweza kuongeza usawa ni katika kazi zilizo rasmi. Kuhakikisha wanawake wanakuwa viongozi, kuhakikisha wanawake wasomi au wanawake wanasomeshwa ili waweze kuchukua kazi zilizo rasmi zaidi.
Lakini kwa mimi jinsi ninavyoamini, naamini mwanamke akiwezeshwa anaweza vizuri na anaweza kutekeleza majukumu yako vizuri na ikawa sawa kabisa.
Elimu, uchumi na siasa au ngazi za maamuzi.
Mwanamke anaweza, mwanamke ni kiongozi,
Mwanamke
ni jembe,
mwanamke ana makusudi yake ya kipekee.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ya Opong, and I'm the sector leader for sustainable development, based here in Tanzania, working with the country management unit. And it is my pleasure this morning to present on the special topic of our 17th economic update on empowering women, expanding assets and economic opportunities. And I'd like to do that in 4 parts, if I may. For the first part, I'm going to give a quick overview of some of the major progress that has been achieved in areas of gender equality in Tanzania. And then I'll move on to drill down a little bit more into the economic data and the economic indicators and look at the progress and the gaps. And then I'll look at the evidence on how expanding access to assets and boosting women's empowerment has key economic gains. And I'll finally end with looking at the policy options that are available based on global evidence. So if we look at the evidence, we see that overall progress has been made in key areas of gender equality in Tanzania. If we look at family planning, we see that there's been a drop in the total fertility rate from 6.2 to 4.8 births from 91 to 2019. We see that between 92 and 2010, there was a drop in unmet needs from family planning from 28 to 22%. We see that in related issues of education and voice and agency, the gender parity in net enrollment has been achieved at the primary and lower secondary levels. And we see that protections have been put in place to establish women's and children's protection committees. Gender desks have been established and one-stop centers. So protections put in place to really try and prevent gender-based violence. Also, if we look at issues of illness and disease, we see that, we see that national health guidelines have been updated, and the agenda for accelerating and preventing HIV is also has been accelerated. Nevertheless, I think the main big picture issue here is that there is room for growth. Yes, there have been successes, and yes, there's been progress, but there's room for growth. For example, if we look at the total fertility rate, at 4.8 births per woman, this still remains higher than the average for sub-Saharan Africa. If we look at the adolescent fertility rate, at 115 births per 1,000 women, this also remains higher than rates for sub-Saharan Africa. Although, as was mentioned, gender parity in net enrollment has been achieved at primary and lower secondary levels, it has not been achieved at upper secondary levels. And at 40% and 44% respectively, rates of gender-based violence and intimate partner violence remain high. We also see, in terms of HIV/AIDS, that more women than men are infected, although again, the rates have gone down. If we now look at key economic indicators, we also see that over the past decades, Tanzania has made considerable progress in key indicators. Over the several decades, the country, as we know, has successfully transitioned to low middle income country status. We know, as was mentioned earlier, that the labor force participation rate is above the sub-Saharan African average of 68. Here in Tanzania, it's 80. And that the ratio of female to male participation in wage and salaried work also increased, 35% to 64% from 2000 to 2019. And that between 2004-05 and 2015-16, the share of women engaged in unpaid agricultural work fell from 78 to 64%. And that between 2011 and 2017, the share of women with a bank account rose from 14% to 42%. So again, if we look at the big picture, there have been some successes and considerable progress. Nevertheless, if we turn now to the challenges, we see that women do continue to face significant challenges across several economic dimensions. As was mentioned earlier, female wage workers earn about 88 cents for each dollar earned by men. At an average of $158 per month, the earnings of female wage workers are below the averages for many comparable sub-Saharan African countries. And was also mentioned earlier, the gender gap in agricultural productivity is estimated at 20 to 30%. And 97% of that gap is explained by women's low access to male family labor. If we turn now to land ownership and access to assets, we also see that More women than men are insecure in terms of access to land. Approximately 26% of men are sole owners of land compared to 7% of women. And that 80% of male landowners lack a title deed compared to 86% of women. If we turn now to home ownership, we see that 38% of women own a house, either alone or jointly, compared to 41% of men. And 7% of women claim sole ownership, compared to 26% of men. If we turn now to areas of financial inclusion, we see that on the positive side, the share of women with an account rose from 14% to 42% from 2011 to 2017. And yet this 42% compares with 52% of men in 2017 had an account at a formal financial institution or mobile money provider. And we see that there are also gender differentials and familiarity with the formal financial sector, with 13% of men in the first quintile who've been inside a bank compared to just 4% of women. So now if we turn to the third part of the presentation, looking at expanding access to assets and boosting women's empowerment, and look at the evidence. If we turn back to the agricultural sector, we see that bridging the gender gap in agricultural productivity in and of itself can boost a country's GDP. And estimates suggest that closing the gender gap in agricultural productivity in the Tanzanian context could lift approximately 80,000 Tanzanians out of poverty every year, increase annual agricultural output by 2.7%, and boost annual GDP by 0.86%. Reducing gender gaps in the labor force participation can also increase GDP. And a recent study here in Tanzania found that closing the difference between male and female employment in Tanzania could increase long-term per capita GDP by 4.8%. If we now look at issues related to land and assets and how crucial they are in supporting economic development, we see a number of pieces of evidence that we'd like to point to today. If we look at land tenure security, we see that it's associated with increased investments in land conservation, for example. A study in Rwanda found that individuals whose plots had been registered were 10 percentage points more likely to invest in soil conservation and 15 percentage points more likely among female-headed households. If we look at financial inclusion, we see that it's linked with lower poverty rates and increased intra-household bargaining power. It can boost intra-household bargaining power and promote more equitable roles within the community, as some studies have demonstrated. We also see that equitable access to assets is core to promoting women's economic empowerment. And asset ownership among women is associated with increased decision-making power regarding agricultural production, improved access to labor, and greater control over household expenditure decisions. If we reflect a little on the pandemic, we see that it has also disproportionately affected women's employment opportunities. And as was mentioned, the Tanzania high-frequency phone surveys between June and July of 2021, of the reasons stated for not working, around 26% of women stated illness, compared to 16% of men. 10% of women stated business closed as the reason for not working, compared to 3% of men. I would like to end by reflecting a little bit on the policy environment and on the opportunities and the evidence of what it takes to boost women's economic opportunities and access to assets. And I think the main point here is that it requires a holistic approach, an approach that touches on a number of different interventions. Expanding women-tailored apprenticeship programs and offering business and life skills and training to female entrepreneurs has been shown to be effective. I want to mention a program in Liberia which offered technical skills and life skills training to young girls and led to a 50% increase in employment. Another example is from Togo, where a business training program working with micro-entrepreneurs found that women who received personalized training increased their profits by 40%. We also see that offering behavioral interventions to promote financial inclusion among women makes a difference. Providing women with financial accounts is associated with increased savings, boosted investment in businesses, and increased daily expenditure. If we turn now to interventions related to land and the agricultural sector, we see that strengthening land rights, women's land rights in particular, by offering land titling subsidies and providing incentives to co-title also makes a difference. And here we could point to enforcing the Lands Act and the Village Lands Acts from 1999, which seek to address the gender discrimination that women often face in land registration and in securing land tenure. In terms of bridging gaps in agricultural productivity and ensuring women have equal access to inputs, here the focus could be on ensuring equal access to pesticides, to fertilizers, ensuring that agricultural extension services are expanded to women, to female crop owners, and are better tailored to their needs, addressing any financial limitations and restrictive gender norms which prevent female farmers from hiring more productive male labor. And then finally, I want to end by saying that another key area of attention is to help girls finish school and enter the workforce, and really pushing forward the end child marriage agenda and enacting strategies to empower girls. Evidence shows that conditional cash transfer programs, for example, have been proven effective for keeping female students enrolled in schools. And I'd finally like to end by looking at enforcing the ruling from the High Court of Tanzania in 2016 that marriage of girls under 18 years of age is unconstitutional, and the subsequent ruling from the Court of Appeals subsequently reaffirming this. So those are just some of the plethora of activities and interventions and policy approaches that could be taken to boost women's economic opportunities and access to assets, and I'd like to end there. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Yaa. That was a very rich insight into progress, room for growth. I like the way you put it that way. The World Bank has its own language, when it wants to say tough messages, puts them in a positive spin. Room for growth, which means we can improve, right? And also some of the both policy level interventions, I think, but the ones I found also quite fascinating are the one-on-one personal sort of emotionally intelligent interventions to make sure that women are able to access these assets and they're able to access the economic opportunities and use them in the most productive ways possible. So thank you very much. Thank you both for those presentations and for those insights from the report. Let's now turn to this wonderful panel here and to get your reactions to what you've heard and what you might have read if you were able to read anything in advance. By way of introduction, I'm just going to start beside me and go outwards. We'll start with Carol. I've known Carol. Carol Dotsi is one of Tanzania's foremost women entrepreneurs. Very brave, courageous woman who has been through all sorts of hurricanes in promoting business and empowerment of young people and women and in the digital space. So we'll be hearing from Carol your own personal views, experiences around this particular topic. Dr. Nandera Mhando, newly appointed Commissioner for Social Welfare at Dr. Zainab Chaula's ministry. She is a sociologist and an anthropologist at the same time and looking into informal sector businesses. So we'd like to hear from you, your own experiences there. Irene Madeje calls herself a, what do you call yourself? A financial inclusion advocate, right?
Absolutely.
Are you a former banker like me?
I am.
You are. Don't tell them. They're still bankers. But for financial inclusion advocate, we'd really like to hear more about your work and what you're seeing works and doesn't work in terms of financial inclusion and access to assets. Dr. Samuel Ndandala, who doesn't like to be called a doctor because he says he's not yet a doctor. He's a senior manager at Deloitte and one person I've known for quite a while, but I don't want to sound patronizing. But I remember him when he was newly hired at PwC. This is over 20 years ago. And look at him. You are old, I'm sorry. It's showing on your head. But expert in economics, finance, and taxation, and I'm going to challenge you to tell us a little bit about what private sector is or isn't doing in terms of this topic of access to assets and economic opportunities. And last but certainly not least, Hodan Ado. welcome. UN Women Representative in Tanzania since April 2018. That's quite a while. And we'd like to hear from you about the bigger picture of promoting gender equality nationally and globally. And generation equality can really boost this agenda in Tanzania. So let me start. So welcome, please, the panel. A simple question to all of you. In 30 seconds, what did you hear that struck you the most, that was the most interesting, insightful, surprising, or disappointing? What did you hear that was from the report, so from the macro or from the women's section? We'll start with you.
For me, what really struck me was the fact that in Tanzania, we have higher average of women who are actually, in economic sectors already. They are getting salaried. We're talking about the average in sub-Saharan being 63, in Tanzania 80%. So, I mean, I was just trying to think, how is that fitting to some of the statistics and facts that we know on the ground, where we still have women still in terms of income, they're falling behind. The statistics are showing they're earning half of what the men are earning. From financial inclusion, we'll talk about still there, you have more women that are outside the system, especially the banking sector. So, I mean, that's just very conflicting sort of information. And to know that it's actually existed for some time and we are ahead. So we need to think critically and see how can we just really, it's a low-hanging fruit. That's where I'm actually looking at it from.
So more women in the labor force, but how come we're not seeing really
We're not seeing money, we're not seeing those improvements and stuff like that,
Dr. Mhando, what surprised you the most?
I think, personally, I find nothing surprising. I think maybe it comes from the different research I've been reading. We know women are out there. A lot of them are in business. We know a lot of them are doing farming. But we know that definitely there are gaps, a lot of gaps, which is causing all these results that we are seeing. And that has to do also with the process, the culture, the society that these women are in.
Right.
And as women struggle to confront, it seems a lot of programs are leaving men behind. So they're not supporting women more and more. And that's why we are seeing an increase in violence and so forth. So for me, what I see, if you look from the informal sector to farming, that is the result. Yes, women are relegated. They're doing the least, less with capital issues, and they're more into perishable and cooking, food vending and stuff like that. They're into farming without enough labor, and they're not able to access land, bigger land for rent. So you really see that's why this is.
So the gaps that were mentioned in the report, those are, very familiar for you.
Yes.
Very familiar. My surprising one was the fact that women just didn't have access to male labor at the farm. That was an interesting statistics. Carol, what surprised you or what was insightful?
I think it's what I didn't see that acted as a reminder on what more we need to do. So we saw a lot of figures on the gender gaps across a lot of sectors, but one thing that I didn't see was the digital divide, which to me should be at the very core of women's inclusion, whether it's in financial services, whether it's in just the broader economic opportunities or economic aspects. So how many women are accessing digital opportunities? How many women are online? How many women have access to the digital economy? And that just speaks to a limitation that we've been trying to address for a couple of years now, which is the lack of disaggregated data, which I'm now going to put a call to the World Bank and say, is there anything you can do about, closing the digital gender divide, but mainly or particularly on the area of data? Because I believe that with all this data that we have on all these other sectors, if we have the data on the digital divide, the gender digital divide, we might be able to come up with more tailor-made solutions and interventions that would reel more women in terms of really encouraging or promoting access to these economic opportunities and assets, as the theme tells us.
And keeping them safe online.
And keeping them safe online.
Absolutely. I have 2 daughters. I'm worried about that myself.
Yeah, as you should.
Samuel, what surprised you or didn't surprise you? What new insight? You look at figures all day, every day. Did you find anything interesting there to grab you?
Yeah, just two things. And well, the first surprise was being invited to this panel. When I was invited, I had to remind my good friend Loy that I am still male. And if it's about financial inclusion and economic empowerment for women, I would be glad to participate. So it's great to see that some men are coming along. But I think the interesting thing about Tanzania's economy over the last 20 years is that it has been quite impressive, quite consistent growth. But it has coincided with, I think, for the first time in our post-colonial history, perhaps in history, that women are coming into the labor force, getting into actual formal employment, but also getting into businesses. So you would say the transition of the Tanzanian economy from a low-income country to a middle-income country is greatly accelerated, has been accelerated by the fact that now we have women. We're not there yet, but we have women contributing more to the labor force. And that is on the back of the fact that, the wings are still clipped. An average woman, I read somewhere that an average woman has 5 hours of unpaid homework for every 1.5 hours of a man's work. So women have pushed our economy considerably over the last 20 years, and I think that's quite interesting. I think the other bit that I would like us to explore a little bit more is the fact that we are addressing institutions and laws, but we really have to do a better job addressing norms. Yeah. Because you would have great laws, you would have great institutions, but if the norms are not there, women face the risk of asset expropriation. They face the risk of contracts not being enforced. If you've tried to buy land in Tanzania, for example, from a woman, even if they don't need spousal consent, they would still want to get spousal consent. So it has to do a lot with the norms of our society. So it's a very interesting dimension to empowerment.
Great point there. We'll come back to it right after we hear. I'm going to twist the question slightly from you, given your big global experience on this issue. What did you find that most inspired you and encouraged you in what you heard about Tanzania's experience with gender and economic access to assets?
Yeah, I think what was very interesting is that in rare occasions do we see government and World Bank and other international speaking the same language in terms of the issues, the analysis on where we are. And I think, what's very good about the Tanzania case, as it was said by the PS, is that there's been a lot of investments that the government has made on the laws and policies, and even, especially policies of the 10% allocation for local government and so forth. So there's quite a bit that has to be commended, and I think the report comes out in that way, that it does that. But as in many countries, and I would like to follow up on Samuel's point, to analyze or to go deeply into the figures, the data that we're seeing, what's missing is the other elements, the qualitative analysis. What does it mean for women? Because they're not, in an island on their own. They're in a culture. They're in practices that have a huge amount of impact on their lives, whether they have access to education, to agricultural productivity, to political participation, and even to protecting themselves from violence, which is such an important intersector in terms of the barrier for women and girls' access to their human capital potential. So I think that the analysis it's very good. It is building on global perspective, as it was said by Ya. And it builds on some research that was done, especially on the agricultural productivity, on the gender gap of agricultural productivity, which I think we partnered with the bank many years ago. So the evidence is still there, in terms of how do we then move forward. And it requires multiple interventions that are intersectoral, that are holistic in their interventions, that define, the appropriate interventions. And with Tanzania and globally, we have only 8 years before the commitments for the Sustainable Development Goals. The United Nations here in Tanzania, we're just now developing a new Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework in partnership with the government, in partnership with private sector, which I think the report didn't mention. A lot of the responsibility was on the women and so forth, but this private sector and partnerships that is so essential for employment, for entrepreneurship, for even, in terms of the opportunities that the private sector is providing for women is important. So we need to look at it from a broader perspective, and I think the analysis in the report, it's very, very good, but we need to go deeper to then understand what does it mean from a qualitative perspective? How do we then move forward? What are the actual barriers that are preventing women and girls for reaching their potential and economic empowerment? And it's those types of interventions that need to be done together with government, civil society, which is an important resource in Tanzania, private sector, United Nations, World Bank and other IFIs and other development partners that are also investing in the country. But it's important to ensure that women are part of this discussion as well. So I think it's a very good report, but it asks you more questions. So why?
So let me ask a question, actually, that was raised by Samuel on norms. It's actually the title of the report, Empowering Women. Now, that word caused some reaction over here. You didn't notice when you were watching the video. But some people here were going, So, Irene, you didn't like that word empowering, It was on the video, the second video that was there. Yeah. Carol, you raised the issue in a tweet. You wrote a paper about it. The semantics, however, are important in norm setting, aren't they? Yeah, what you name something, how you define something is important. Why don't you like it, Irene? What is your problem with the word empowering? And then I'll come to you, Carol.
Not necessarily a problem with the word empowering per se, but it's just the way we've actually traditionally used it, and the way it was said. That I think it was said in Swahili. We should empower women. We should. As if the power is actually with somebody else to actually give it to a woman. And so it's not necessarily the word itself, but it's just the power that is actually seated from outside a woman that needs to be actually bestowed upon a woman. And that is really the positioning that we're taking, that it's our time. We should actually take these women, we should empower them. No, the women are already empowered. In fact, earlier today, I was reading, somebody just wrote, I think on social media, is women are already empowered and they have power. The thing is, people just need to understand that power and actually be able to appreciate it, so that when you see a woman, going back to the first question, we already have quite a number of them who are actively participating in economic activities. If you look at even some of the reports on small, medium enterprises, we have more women who are actually owning these businesses. So what does it mean when somebody says that we need to empower you while a woman is already out there? And some of this information that we just talked about here, not only are they actively in paid economic activities, but they're also doing this unpaid labor, the social burden, the responsibility to raise and nurture, the society. So, it's just more on the positioning of that power, not necessarily with the word empowering.
Okay. Carol? What's the alternative? You had some nice words out there.
Yeah, so my alternative, just to echo what Irene said, we are hoping, us in the Global South, the women who are contributing, or rather involved in different areas of women's inclusion, we would like to insist that most of the solutions have been sort of like a top-down approach. Mm-hmm. And just to add on to what Irene has said, at the end of the day, what are the local women? What is the local specific context of these women? Are we acknowledging the power that they already have, right? And so if we are acknowledging, then why not call them women advancement, meaning that you're supporting them to advance from one stage to another? Why not call them women support programs? Because you're supporting them to move from one step to another towards sustainable development. So at the end of the day, to me, women empowerment feels like a continuation of, all the solutions that we keep on imposing on the targeted groups and disregarding the specific context that could possibly give us a really good entry point and say, okay, we have an encouraging number of women entrepreneurs. What can we do to amplify the power that they already have? So that's always my alternative. And again, we need to own the narrative. Women empowerment is not our narrative. It is really not. So do we have to find out what our narrative is as Tanzanian women, as women in the global south? What could that look like? How could that now speak into the bigger picture of sustainable development and actually supporting women to advance? That would be my take.
Dr. Mhando, what are your thoughts on that one? We're now changing the title of the report. Yeah. It's going to be called Advancing Women. Cancel it, Advancing Women, and then the rest reads well. Yeah. Doctor, what do you think?
In fact, I was just laughing because it has been a very big topic in our office, led by our...
In the ministry?
Yes, by our permanent secretary.
I'm going to come to you after this.
So many times in our management meeting or with staff meetings, she will be always talking about, what is that empowering? Yeah. Are you not powered enough, Nandel? Yeah. Are you not a commissioner? Yes. Don't you have a PhD? So what is wrong? Why are you not coming out with the power you have to show others? So for me, I find it quite interesting that you are really hitting into what the ministry is focusing on right now, is to tell people that women are empowered. Of course, there are things around that are deterring the situation. Yeah. As we are speaking here, just to recognize that power. We see more women into labor. We are talking of an increase of women in the farms, in the office, in the informal sector, and everywhere. So why isn't that recognized as power and be boosted in a positive way? So for us at the ministry, we see a big gap in the coordination of all these people who are empowering women in that sense that you call it. And coordination in what sense? We find that people are dashing out money in the same location, geographical location, with the same activity. So we cannot see the impact. But we are also seeing people paying money, giving out money, and dashing it out, very tiny money, and expect that a woman will be able to transform. To be empowered, as you said. So we really need to be serious when we talk about financing. How are we financing these women? Especially when we target groups and you give 2 million for a group of 10 women, what will they do? So that is why the narrative keeps on focusing on empowering and not supporting. Because if you talk about supporting, what we want to see as a ministry is a coordinated support. We want to see the outcome in real numbers, but in real, what you're talking about, qualitative. Let's hear about women say we now can, we have assets, we now have access, real enough finance, and stuff like that. We are having homes, building our houses, we see tangible results. So one thing, as you were saying, I see a problem, not just top-down. I think it's a top-down, external, inward. Yes. What we think as a country and what we want to see as a change is not what those who are supporting us want it to be done. So what we are calling is, as a ministry now, is a focus where we can have a basket fund, where we will support women and we have a basket fund for children, most vulnerable children, because we think these two things are quite linking into each other. As we see more children in the streets, we see more vulnerable children, that means something is wrong in the family. And as you know, in our culture, it's the women who take care of the children. So if there's a problem with women, more kids are on the street. If less problem here, you will see a lot of solution here. So what we are calling is, let's have a coordinated means of basketry where we are placing our funds to see the output, so that we turn the story into successful stories.
Can I be a bit naughty and ask Dr. Chaula to weigh in on this issue? May I approach the bench? What are your thoughts on what you've just said on this issue of empowerment and the language and the semantics on this topic?
It's very interesting. Especially, I'm echoing with Nandela, we have already been empowered by God. But most of the time, men are not recognized their position. And for sure, we need to do something with this report. We need, I agree, issue of supporting rather than empowering. What support we need is to have some kind of analysis. And I was asking my people, we have seen a number of facts, because fact is a fact. But in reality, it doesn't tie up. And I used to work with analysis most of the time. We have been seeing a number of activity, especially when you say I'm supporting resources of finance, giving this number of women. I used to ask, how many in terms of numbers women are there suffering from poverty? How many to start with? Then you can select a group of people as a cohort, support them with the quality information in terms upon give us the fact that we needed to have business skills to the woman to empower or to improve their business. I found most of the women are poor, carrying the child, no good houses, no enough capital. But we keep on saying we're empowering women. What are those women who were empowered? Show them. I was asking Nandela yesterday, we have 900,000 women who are empowered with this such amount of funds. Where are they? I found a lot in the street, cooking, cleaning, with poor income activities with money. Actually, we need to do something. I'm very frustrated, really, because I need to empower women, but how? A lot of story. I need to change this theory into practice. I used to work with the output, especially we have these street children, we have houses for these children. What are the exit plan? Because the number is increasing. It's increasing, and it really is a problem, especially with this small business, Wamachinga. It's very famous, Wamachinga. How are we going to improve from Wamachinga to be medium entrepreneurs instead of having Machinga forever and ever? So help us. That's why I'm here to listen the output of this discussion to give the permanent solution. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you. No pressure. Solutions, people. That's where we turn to next. And I'm going to start with you, Irene. People always talk about money, money, money. If I just get money, I'll be okay. Financial inclusion. And the numbers are impressive for Tanzania, driven by mobile. What difference is it really making? And if it isn't making a difference, how can it be made to make a bigger, better difference? There's access to finance for women.
It's not necessarily a very simple question. Because it all starts there. I mean, the role of finance is a catalyst, it's an enabler, and all of that. So, I mean, let me just take a little bit of a picture, which is repeating some of the statistics that Ya has said, and then land into that question. So, yes, we've seen great improvement in financial inclusion in Tanzania. We're talking about in the span of 10 years, this country was talking about close to 55% of people. Now here it's men and women and everybody else, completely outside the financial system, without any sort of mechanism that they're actually depending upon. And then this is a reversal 10 years later with the data from 2017. FinScope, you're talking about 65% being in the system and largely driven by mobile financial services, digital financial services. Now just landing in straight to the position of a woman. Yes, the women have moved along, you know, you just talk about the big numbers and we'll go into the pockets of really what are they doing within the financial system, because that really matters as well. Women have moved along, but along the line, there is actually a gap that is quite persistent, that is actually non-wavering. So we have like anything between 10 and 12%, you see a very strong gap that is existing. But more so, this financial inclusion is actually including, all types of financial services, payments, moving money, having access to a bank account, having a microfinance and a credit. But if you really look deep into the kind of a more formal sort of financial services that will really support income generation and livelihood improvement and resilience into a household, that is really where you start to see bigger gaps existing, and you see more women being more on the microfinance, environment, or not necessarily actively participating in the banking system, or even within the banking system. I echo what my sister Caro just said. We need disaggregated data so that we can actually go deep and actually be able to understand some of these information qualitatively, but definitely the information that we have, you see more women not being quite active. And yes, all this improvement that we've seen, what has actually happened that has actually supported it? Yes, we've seen very strong awareness, and even the information that we had today from Permanent Secretary, you see the government being completely intentional and aware to ensure that we are, prioritizing and being intentional for women financial inclusion. You will see from National Financial Inclusion Framework, very strong targets being put in, an understanding of some of those challenges that are existing, that are putting a woman outside the system, and a call to action really to the whole stakeholder in the way in which it can happen. But from an infrastructure point of view, which is really where we've gotten majority of our gains, you see the digital financial services really, and the proliferation of the agents network, which have actually allowed a woman who was completely outside the vicinity to actually have a reach to a financial access point, or even the agency banking. This has been some of the means and ways in which have actually assisted and actually to reach the women who are most of the time outside the peripheral. Coming in now to the question, yes, and then also response from a demand side. We see the banks coming in, they are offering products, they're saying, we have a woman account, and I'll go to that. We have a woman account, we serve women, and, a lot of pink blushing, make it pink, and it's just, yeah, we are serving the women. And honestly, it's only the beginning, and we're seeing more of that, and that's important, because the journey has to start somewhere. We're seeing more of that, even right now, even recently, we've seen even a bond being reasoned just with the sole intention to actually ensuring that we're serving
complementing factor that would actually allow for them to really be present, you know, and, you know, take or grasp the opportunities that we're presenting to them, right? And then when you go back to norms, which is, I think it will speak to the salience, is you're telling this woman, get online, you know, I'm going to register your business. The minute they start making more money than the husband, it's an issue at home, you know, and they're subjected to domestic, intimate partner violence, and at the end of the day, they come and tell you that, you know what, I don't think this is for me. At the end of the day, I have to put my family first. So how do you have policies and frameworks that would, one, push for a mindset change when it comes to gender mainstreaming? You know, it would push for financial inclusion. It would push for more girls to stay in school, because even when we're looking at the figures, you look at the school enrollment rates from primary school all the way to secondary, we don't have the same women or girl child who is graduating at higher secondary level or higher learning institution. So at the end of the day, yes, we need the role models. Yes, we need all these other interventions. They're quite beautiful. I call them cosmetic interventions. But what exactly are we doing about our cultural, sociocultural norms that are continuing to act as limitations and barriers towards the girl child's development, I would say, advancement. So yeah, I think I would.
Doctor, that question to you. You're in government. Are you making policy after studying it? How do you address these norms and salience? I like your salience. How does government address these structural impediments, really, to women accessing assets and accessing economic scale?
Well, just to answer, I would say it should not be the business of the government alone. Yeah. Because a lot of you are holding a lot of money because you are using it to say you're supporting the government. So all that money put together, the government money and the money out there, should be put in the right place. One thing I'm seeing a big gap here in all this discussion we're talking about, where is the boy child? Thank you. And we're expecting that all our efforts and interventions are for girls, and we are expecting that the boys will receive the girls happily ever after marriage and not challenge them and not accept the situation as it is. I grew up in a pastor's family, so I can express myself this much just because I got that chance too, in a family with more girls than boys. But going on through, I learned through the process. I was encouraged, and until today, I'm still being encouraged by my boss and other people. And through that process, you are able. But if we talk about this story as a one-angle story, it's about women alone. It's about girls alone. By the time I come to marry you, you don't know me at all. This is a new Nandera. I don't know this kind of a woman. I'm just that a woman who's supposed to bow down on me, who should be accepting everything I say. What kind of a woman are you bringing? That's why we are seeing an increase in GBV. And one of the gaps I know that will be formally checked, we need to look at the TASAF, for example. Dashing out of the TASAF money and what it's doing to women. We are not preparing men to understand that Nandera is the commissioner. Anytime at the night, the minister or the permanent secretary will be calling, and she will have to answer and can go out anytime. He will not understand that. So we need to, as we speak of supporting women, enabling girls, we need to do the same to the boys. We need to prepare them to learn to change the culture. As we do together, I'm sure in the future things will change. But as an anthropologist talking about change of culture, perception needs a long-term strategy. We don't need like a one-year intervention, two-year intervention. Some of the problems that we really face as a government are projects that are short-term. And also the projects are also single. They are not multi-angled in terms of looking at the problem. Look at the presentation that we just heard from the World Bank and some of the success stories that she's been telling us. And you could hear her talk about issues of projects on land so that women can access land. You hear about projects where they can access skill. You hear about projects where they can access input and so forth. But these projects without being together, you have one project that has this multi-strategy. Deal with the culture here. Deal with the education here. So that you can solve something at least But when we have these projects that are angling only one, okay, you give me the land. But when you give me the land, at the end, when my husband died, my kids come to me. You know, the boys, they'll be, this is our land. Hey, give us the land. So you have that kind of one path, which is not really going to have that multi, kind of, you have the results that are really impactful in terms of seeing a woman being able to contribute and enjoy her labor or fruits like a man. So I see that's where I think we lack that. So we heard about digital skills. We heard about, chuma ulete. There's one article you should read by Jackie Mgumia on the chuma ulete and issues of business. That is quite interesting, and it talks about even for young boys and girls, youth who are doing business, being supported, and they can go, continue, they can make it because of issues of social culture. So that really tells you how you need to deal into these situations. But we know for sure that the stories of women are in rotating and saving groups. It's very, very few women who will not find them, and they will be in the different networks. And this is a very angled, good place where it's a start where you can really work out. Why start registering new groups every day, while you have already women arranged? Sometimes it brings a kind of what you call a turbulence. People are already focused doing their thing, and then you start again with another group. So I think somehow we need to look at this in a bigger picture and find out a better way we can protect both a boy and a girl for the future. Otherwise, I don't see any good future without that.
Could I make some intervention? I think
Yes,
you sort of, I was going to say, you forgot about me.
No.
Yeah, I think, I think everything it's been said is very true and so forth. But one of the important things that we're forgetting about the study that has come out, and it's a reality in Tanzania, is the issues of discriminatory laws. Laws or regulations that are not being enforced to protect women and girls. And the reason we want to focus on women and girls is because, my dear sister from the ministry, is because they're not in the same playing field. They're not because of social norms, practices, and opportunities at the same level as men and boys. It's not to say we have to disregard men and boys. We have to engage them. We have this interesting efforts of how do we engage men and traditional leaders and male institutions to be part and parcel of the equation for gender equality. It's a long, long struggle and so forth. But I think in Tanzania, in the constitutions, there are very important, statements that are calling for equality, and then at the same time is then pulling it away from women. So we need really, and that's one of the important things that the study is saying, is that how do we look at, review these laws that are discriminatory for women in terms of preventing them from opportunities, looking at regulations in business. It's not easy to say that it's, I have 50% of my women are in leadership, which is fantastic. I'm sure you're implementing the women economic principles and you signed up for it and so forth. But then how are you then translating that here in Tanzania in terms of opportunities? If women, poor women, marginalized women, disadvantaged women, women in communities are having, a hard time even accessing basic issues as water, as access to, productive resources, land ownership, title deeds. If you have, inheritance laws that are so archaic, not to say Tanzania is archaic, but if you have these laws that are preventing women from inheriting because of religion or culture and so forth, we cannot progress. If Tanzania wants to be, and that's, I think, the basic message from the reports, Tanzania has made incredible progress, but in order for Tanzania to reach its potential, to meet its incredible obligations and commitments that they have in the 5-year development plan, the Vision 2050, is it? Even in, Zanzibar, all of that, we need to look at what are the institutions, what do we want to change, what do we want to transform in terms of the institutions, the legal structures, the regulations that are preventing women from reaching their potential. And I think the issues of, access and assets, it's as economists and business owners, those are essential. But how do you then, what is it that's preventing them from reaching? And what is the obligation for government? Government has important obligation. When you're reviewing your budget, are you applying a gender-sensitive budgeting plans, resources? How are we making sure where women are present in the key sectors, in agriculture, in tourism, or in small enterprises? How are we making sure that the resources, the budget plans are sensitive to that? You have, it's a matter of looking at it holistically. How do we ensure, private sector, that you also meet your commitments to women have access and so forth. So I think it's the laws, the practices, the social norms, the institutions that are very much against equality. Yeah, it's just the reality that we're in. In Tanzania, as I said earlier, it's not an island in itself, but if it wants to progress in terms of reaching the middle income countries, if it wants to compete at the regional level, we need to look at all these barriers for trade, for women's access to cross-border trade. What are the lack of challenges that they're having in the regulations and protection of their rights to move? We've been supporting a program for, I think it was you who had mentioned, was it the women in the marketplaces? Yes. Yeah, they have legal structures that aren't put in place. Many of them are very much, against women participation and voice. So, there's issues of sextortion when you're accessing basic rights on health and education and so forth. Especially if you go to communities that are very disadvantaged, that are marginalized and so forth. Issues of language. We were trying to meet with women in Arusha, in a village, and they mentioned the issues of even accessing the TASAF. TASAF has set all these rules and regulations. They did not really taking women into account. What are their needs? What types of jobs do they want? What are the challenges they're facing in terms of even accessing the fund in their villages? Are they coming to them? Do they have to travel thousands of miles because they are in the interior? The road structures are far away from where they can access. So it's a matter of, like I was saying, I think the issues of the report is very, very important. A lot of policy issues are there. The data is there. We need to go deep. And in terms of then what do we need to do to support Tanzania as development partners is really unpacking that and coming out with solutions that have the women at the center, yeah, and their voices and their participation, at least to ask them on that. So it's a matter of, I think, a lot of structural, legal, and institutional changes that need to take into account. There is progress, mind you, but then the private sector, I think, has not created an conducive environment. I very much like the NMB initiative on the Jariza gender bonds. It's probably one of the first that you're seeing in the region. Kenya and others are trying to pick that up. But then there's also experience from Latin America, from Asia and so forth, where government is also taking that initiative. How do we then include that? How do we ensure that we're looking at it from a feminist perspective that is promoting equality of opportunities and that is protecting rights of especially the marginalized women, the ones that do need that, leg up. Yeah. So I think, but there's a lot. I think it's a fantastic report, a lot of information, lots of things that we could all use. And just to plug, we're going to be launching, if you don't mind, Mara, we're going to be launching a report on social institutions and gender inequality index for Tanzania that looks at the social norms, attitudes, and perspectives that have an impact on bodily autonomy, access to opportunities, economic opportunities, leadership, violence, where so many issues are there where a woman has to, reality, the majority of our women for Tanzania and East Africa, for them to even get out of the family home, to go and do a small business or go into the farm and access, they have to have the permission of their male relations and so forth. So we need to change that It's a long process, but the laws have to be, definitely, you have to have a law. You have to change the inheritance law, which is so critical.
Dr. Chaula, the laws. Low-hanging fruit. Not necessarily easy to pick, but low-hanging fruit. It's 11:30, and the program says here it's time for audience discussion Q&A. You monopolized the discussion so far. They've been listening very patiently to you. So now they need to push back or propose. You wanted to say something, and then any hands? I've seen one hand over there. Any other?
Sam wanted to finish his answer.
Sam wanted to finish his answer. Sam and I will negotiate this a little bit later. Ask Sam a question, and then he can finish his answer. But please, doctor.
Very shortly, I just wanted to say, Hodan, I agree with what you're saying, but I think my take comes from just growing up in Tanzania and understanding my brothers, my sister, my fathers, and my grandfathers. Yeah. Law alone will not work. Absolutely. We have to change the attitude, perception, and I still maintain, I think as a country, and I believe so, if we bank on a long-term investment to empower girls, women, boys, we will get somewhere. But if we don't do that, we will deal with law, regulations. These policemen are men. They've grown through that culture. We see that most hierarchy, most men are on top. So what do? We need boys to understand, to be partners to their sisters. And in the future, things will change. It takes long.
Karibu, yes. Your comment or question?
Yes, Asante. I'm Lilian Mwaganga from UNWA. It's my pleasure to be here.
Sorry, I think we need to bring a microphone to you so that it can be captured properly. Welcome,
yes,
Lilian.
Hello, thank you. I'm Lilian Mwaganga from UN Women. This has been a very interesting discussion. I wouldn't want to echo a lot of insights that have already been shared, but I wanted to start my comments by agreeing to the word empowering. I think it depends in the context and the lens that you're looking at, because I went further, like, okay, what is the definition of empower? To make someone stronger and more confident, especially in controlling their life and also claiming their rights. And I think this is what we want for women. And you can say supporting, you can say advancing, but at the end of the day, what matters is the holistic interventions that you undertake in a particular context. And again, this brings me to the importance of really thinking through the type of women that we are looking at. And there are different dimensions. We've said, okay, we're already empowered, but who is it? Is it somebody like us in urban areas? Or is it a woman in rural areas? Is it a young girl or what? So it's very important as we narrate the story of women to really be very conversant and articulate on the type of women. The definition that I've just given, I think it applies, especially in the context of women in rural areas, and the presentation has really highlighted their issues. So you can be supporting them in the course of doing it. You can be advancing what they're doing, but in the course of doing that, I think you're also empowering them. And then I think it's very important also to, when we speak of empowering or supporting them, to think of the graduation path, what we are really aiming at, what we are looking at for a particular setting where these women are. For instance, empowerment or success for a woman in rural, in urban, educated and uneducated, the context is completely different. I think one panelist explained about the products that we always have in mind, and then when you go to the field, you realize it's not only about the product, but that is not to say that the products are not important. They can be very helpful depending on a particular setting or context. So that is also very important. And I'd like to finally intervene on, in the presentation, there were very good examples on interventions that have been done in a number of countries. And I wanted to comment that in as much as we are looking at empowering and supporting women through specific interventions, it's also important to, and I think I'm echoing one panelist, it takes time. We need to appreciate that, especially for the rural women that are not educated. We really need to be patient in terms of time. And in most cases, when we have interventions, we are so pressed with time. Like, I need to deliver this in 2 years. And then there comes again the number of quantity. Number, how many women do you want to reach? So if you want to do holistic engagements, I think you also need to see the quality and quantity. It can be 10 women, but when you look at the graduation and the path that they've taken, it can be amazing. So in the interventions for women and girls empowerment, we need to be cognizant and how we balance time, how we balance number of engagement. Is it that we just want a report that counts a lot of numbers, but also different interventions for women and also youth. We've spoken about education. For some women, perhaps it's not too easy to provide them with formal education at this point, but we don't want to exclude them. What are we doing with them? And I'm looking really forward to deep dive into the report, but generally, I think it has touched a lot of very key issues. Thank you.
Yeah, you could. So I see, yes, madam. I'm privileging the audience. Then maybe we can come up to the panelists as well. Yes, ma'am. Your name, please, quick introduction, and then your question or comment.
Hello, I'm Dina Mbaga, and I represent Women Fund Tanzania. I would like to be very practical. I realize this is a World Bank report, and therefore, World Bank is a bank. I would like to give 2 examples. The word empowering is really itching into my ears for many years. I'm thinking of my late mother, who, when I was growing up, we built our own house. My mother and other women in the village came together and we built a house. This was before the word empowerment, equal opportunities, and all these were introduced. What somebody would have called plastic words. Okay? Maybe I should use the word empowered. My mother is the one who encouraged me to go to school, study, work hard. At the same time, I had other duties in the family. She never thought of having by the way, she never went to school, but she had a lot of skills. In the same area, there are women who are making pots. They go into the area where they get clay soil. They made pots. From those pots, they sold all over Tanzania. They educated their children. They even made their husbands have shops in Moshi, Same, everywhere. They contributed. Now, this morning, I was listening to Radio Upendo, and one lady was interviewed. She's in Njombe. She's building, she has a building firm. And then they said, a woman having a building firm. She said, yes, I went to VETA, but her aunt was an engineer. Her aunt, not uncle, her aunt, an engineer, encouraged her. Said, you can climb on the roof, you can do this, you can do that, and she's doing very well. And one time, I'm using examples. One time I went into microfinance meeting at, there's a place called Mahakama Ndizi, but for you to be able to locate is not very far from TGNP, Tanzania Gender Network. These very local, I would say local. You see, I hate to use the word education because education is very relative. They came and their main complaint, and some of them were crying. Why, and these are briefcase microfinance people, coming to encourage them to take loans. And if you don't pay it in such a time I'll take away your assets. So they're saying, why are they coming to us? Why aren't they going to other people? Now we are talking about economic empowerment. There are several people, I think Nandera's gave a good examples. My notion of empowerment starts right from when the child is growing up. When you learn the skills, when you are changing attitudes, when your perception becomes different. How do we do this today? I mean, I can change at this age, but my grandchildren can change depending on how I bring them up. We have women who have succeeded in entrepreneurship, many women in Tanzania. I would like somebody to do a study and use that as a mentoring system. Use that to mentor the young generation. Up to now, if you go around Dar es Salaam, you still see women having their baskets on their head, carrying cassava, ripe bananas, this and that. We need to change that system so that women believe in themselves, that they can become big business people, have their own lorries. I have an example of a lady who once got a grant from, I don't want to mention names, it's somebody who's very well known, 800,000 shillings. And after so many years, she came back to say thank you to that guy and was giving him 5 million shillings and said, how did it happen? He said, the money that I took from you, I started selling mchicha. This is vegetables. And then I diversified into another business. Now I have my own lorries going up country, bringing products, and I'm selling. So if we talk, women in Tanzania already have the skills. They have knowledge of what they want to do. What we want to do is to encourage these women to move a step from one business into another. And we have skills in Tanzania, because I'm saying there are women who are already making it. So why don't we take stock of what is happening, learn from those women, how they made it, use them to mentor the young generation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There is a podcast, back to Samuel's salience point. This is me groveling for forgiveness here, for cutting you off. Back to the salience point. There is a podcast of how I made it in business somewhere, you know, which also inspires those who...
Is it in
mostly young
Swahili?
people. No, it's not. It's in English. You do it in Kiswahili. Any other comments or questions, or can I throw one out there? Oh, yes, madam, over there at the back. Dr. Kalage, I have a question for you.
Me too.
Karibu. I think is the microphone on? We can, but I think they need to record you. Go ahead. I think so. You may have to lower your mask.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for very wonderful insights. Dr. Jane Papalika from Rapport. You know, at the institution level, we have been doing different research on women empowerment, like cash transfers to women to improve their livelihood. And, you know, we also looked at the women access to health insurance and other opportunities at the national level. But currently, we are working on women-led SMEs in the Kagera region. In fact, I think this is the last week that we went to Kagera with the Swedish ambassador to Tanzania. You know, we kind of mapped different SMEs, women-led SMEs.
Uh-oh, are we changing the batteries in the microphone?
Sorry for that. I can just use my voice then.
They need to record it, I think.
Hello? Can you hear me? Okay. We kind of mapped different women-led SMEs at the regional level, where we went to different districts in Kagera. So they kind of highlighted quite a lot of challenges that they're facing, SMEs, you know. It was quite interesting that they all say that they received the 10% from the LGA on source. But now one interesting question is that, you know, the LGA, do they really support women in terms of just giving them loans? Or do they support women, you know, along the value chain, as in not only giving them loans, but they should also find the market for them? Because most of them are like, no, here we are. We got the loans, the interest rate free loans, just like the way Dr. Zainab put forward. That they got the loans, but here they are, they have the products, they don't have the market. You know, so they're kind of stranded. You know, so that was quite, you know, sad for us to hear such kind of, you know, stories. And not only that, but what we also have another project in Mtwara and Lindi region. I think you know the LNG, liquefied natural gas. You know, the stories that we had from there, they're saying that, especially women, were like, you know, we are not participating in the, you know, in the project, which is quite huge. I mean, it's around $10 billion, I think. You know, it's worth that amount. So they're like, we are not considered, you know, especially, you know, getting them employment opportunities. They're like, we are not considered. Why is it like this? Is it because that we don't have the skills? We don't have, you know, we don't have, you know, the training that we are supposed to have in the oil and gas sector? So I think, and again, we kind of, you know, thought about it. Is it because of the implementation challenges that the government is facing? We come up with a lot of good policies, you know, from our report. We kind of revise good policies, you know, sometimes we advise the government in terms of policies. But now, what is failing them to implement this challenge, this policy that we are coming up with? You know, so I think I should pose this concern to Dr. Zainab that, you know, I think over the years, there are these challenges, the implementation challenge. We really have good policies. I'm not sure about the institutions that some of the, you know, some of the speakers, you know, kind of highlighted, you know. So I think, Dr. Zainab, you can help us to come up with this solution. Because now I'm afraid next year we'll come here and have the same solutions. In fact, they're very good solutions. We also come up with solutions. But again now, you know, I think the main challenge here is implementation. We really need to implement some of these, you know, policies. We'll keep on saying about, I don't know, enabling business environment for SMEs, you know, but if we don't implement them, then we'll come up again with solutions next year, again next year. I think it will be like back and forth kind of game. So, yeah. I think I wanted just to highlight on that, the implementation challenge that we as researchers are facing. Also, I think maybe the private sector is also facing the same challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comment. I see there's a hand over there. Yes. Karibu.
Asante. Same thing? Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm Saidi from Legal Service Facility, LOCF. Thanks for good presentation and good insights that we have seen and nice discourse that is going on. Legal service works on empowering women. I'm sorry to say that. But we do legal empowerment where we believe that if women is able to navigate in this complex system and structure that we have seen, issue like inheritance law, marriage laws, and things like that, which is very difficult for them to access assets like land or resources. My question or my comment to panelists or to everyone here is on the word empowerment. If someone comes to me and say, Said, I want to give you a training. I do monitoring. I'm monitoring and evaluator. So you give me capacity, you give me mentorship, you give me a training, whatever it is. Am I being empowered or not? Or maybe the way we are coining, because we are mentioning women, is that a problem? If the idea of empowering, as the definition was given there on giving confidence for whoever is respective on that issue, to have a confidence to demand their rights, what's wrong with that word? So if your auntie, if your mom, whoever is encouraging you, actually is empowering you to go to another step. So I don't see the problem. Otherwise, you come up with a new problem, with a new word, then, yeah. So all that, Alan.
Mara, you said we're supposed to have a debate? The report is supposed to rekindle a debate. There are people who want to answer that question, who want to make that point around agency. Shall I bring it back over here? Who would like to? No, never. Carol wants to, in 30 seconds.
Honestly, I would like to take this discussion offline, if you will allow me.
Okay.
Yes.
It's a long discussion.
It's a long discussion because I always say that you need to understand the essence of something before you advocate for it or before you support it. And in my take and in my research, it does not reflect the local realities, unfortunately, the word itself. But I've been very transparent that my issue is the semantics behind it and the narrative that has been brought with it, not necessarily what it implies. But I would love to continue the conversation with you.
Yes, I'm not going to follow on that one, but I think one other element that we sort of didn't discuss through, but it came out, I think, from the report, on the issue of care burden. I think one of you had mentioned it. Yeah. And I think that's very important, where even within, the generation equality commitments that the government has made, one of the issues was to ensure how do we redistribute or redistribute care, which of course is going to take a lot of changes in social norms and practices and attitudes and, but then, how do we make sure that there is affordable care services so that women who do want to engage in economic opportunities have the time. I mean, even if it's a training, they have to have they have to undertake this economic and social cost benefit. Where do I leave my children? Who's going to take care of them? How vulnerable will they? Are they going to be in an unsafe environment? Or do I forgo that opportunity and not participate? And as you've said, during COVID, even though Tanzania did not lock down, but the assessment that we did with RAPOA, actually, it captured during a particular period where children were not in school, were at home. And the burden of care was very much visible. And now there's global discussions. How do we do that? How do we make sure that with the support of governments, private sector, that we do provide care and that we pay for care, and transform it in a way that is accessible so that women can participate, whether it's girls who have dropped out of school because of the pregnancy policy that was there. How do we then make sure that these girls then have that opportunity to engage in terms of providing safe care for their children and so forth? And how do we institutionalize that and not just make it here in the city, but at the rural level? There's an interesting program that we're just now developing with the funding that we received from Finland, and it's looking at local government structures, capacitating the community development workers, but also looking at local structures that are there that could be a source for innovative thinking for the government to pilot certain care facilities, of course, with standards of protection and SOPs that are developed, so that women can participate in public and in private. I mean, so they can even be in leadership positions and economic opportunities, and move them away from the risk of having their children in marketplaces, you know, because you see that, you know, you see women very engaged in informal sector work, and their children are there, they're not safe, they're not protected, and they're constantly having that doubt. So I think that's one of the critical gaps for women's economic empowerment, but also women's engagement in any, you know, any opportunities. So it's how do we make that, institutionalize it, and come up with innovative, creative ways, what's happening next door in Kenya and Rwanda and other places that could be, you know, adapted here.
Sam, yes, Sam.
Yeah. So in addition to salience, one thing that I just want to bring up as an experience within Deloitte is a very intentional process of nurturing the ladies as they climb higher, because I think naturally, particularly when it comes to biological issues like having children and taking care of the children, you do find that somewhere along the line, the ladies would, you know, lose a few months or sometimes a few years taking care of the children. Now, of course, you can legislate. You can say you're going to have them maternity leave. You can protect their jobs legally, but you can't legislate what happens at home. You know, you can't legislate the sharing of responsibility at home. So again, it speaks to the norms. But I think what has worked for us within Deloitte, in Tanzania and across the world, really is to identify those ladies, but also to, I'm not going to use the word empower, but to not impede their progress because they have had children. You know, so if they've had, you know, they've had to take time off, when they come back, you know, you'd have a buddy, a coach, a mentor who is intentionally helping you navigate that phase so that you don't lag behind. Because what we're seeing is that, you know, as a man, I'm not going to be pregnant, so I'm not going to face those biological challenges. And if the lady doesn't get the support, it is inevitable that I may be a few steps ahead if they are not supported. So I think it's important within the corporate world to respect and appreciate the fact that our realities may be different. As we try to get this equality done, our realities may be different. And to, again, normalize the fact that women bring in a different type of skill set and abilities, but also they will bear some specific responsibilities, and that should not be in any way an impediment to their progress, right? And then another bit that you know, is really interesting, again speaking to the cultural norms, you do find, there is a research that was done in Lusaka, that female entrepreneurs are unable to get male employees because men somehow believe that I cannot be led by a woman. So female entrepreneurs get sort of slightly inferior employees. And sometimes
what? Because they are women. Oh my goodness.
Sometimes, well, by the way, salience operates, the closer you are to salience, the better it is. So it's good for girls to see that the president is a lady. Absolutely. But it's better if that president was her mother, because it's closer, you know. So it's good for a girl to see that my global CEO is a woman, but it's better if my regional or my country CEO is a woman, because it's closer, you know, it's more tacit. It's achievable. I can see it. I can feel it. It's possible for me. So that's just a point I wanted to raise. But another thing, reading on that same research, again, women are unable to get quality employees. Women are unable to negotiate better interest rates when it comes to loans. Sometimes it's tougher for women to get extensions of time. So if a man has borrowed money and they are behind a month, a man somehow gets away with it for 2 more months, and a woman would have their property
But then how do you then
taken,
change
right?
that? If I
So,
could interrupt, then how would
so-
you then, as a, in the private sector, then
So-
change
so-
that scenario so that you, as a business, or I'm sorry, you're the facilitator.
It's okay.
So that it doesn't stay this
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
We're always, going to talk about the negatives. And so, how do you move that? And what would you, in business, ensure that the women, when they're coming into your banks and so forth, that they're not, 1 in a million, that the bank is friendly towards them in terms of this. So what can you do? Is there some type of an affirmative action that you can put in place to change that scenario?
Yeah,
I
so
think that's what, would be
So let me wrap up my point. My point is that a lot of the skills and capacities are tacit, not necessarily formal school training. It's the same thing with salience. So what we need to do is, and this is what we're attempting to do at Deloitte, is to make sure that we partner between the leaders who are either male or female with the younger ones who are female, so that they learn on the job. Because skilling is great, but there are soft skills, leadership skills that require you to learn from someone. And this is a key difference that you see. Again, this research that I was reading, I think is really interesting. I would probably share it with you. The women got their skills through formal training. The men got their skills through another man training them. And the tacit knowledge where a man would hold your hand as a man and tell you how to do business versus going to a class or financial literacy class, these are different things. So we need to make sure that we are integrating this coaching and training and mentoring so that women gain that tacit knowledge and skills.
It is hinted at in Ya's presentation there, these sort of personalized, customized skills upgrading initiatives in Tanzania working. You had wanted to make a point, and then I'm actually going to.
I think it's.
I know. This is where you stop when everybody wants to speak.
Okay.
You talk at lunchtime. Okay. Your point, and then we'll close it up.
Last comment, please.
One last comment.
After her, yeah.
I just wanted to respond to Hodan that there's a linkage. You can come with your project to our ministry. I register, my role as a commissioner is to register creches and daycare centers. And we also, as a government, in partnership with other people, have already built 20 in Dodoma and Dar es Salaam. But we have I've registered so many daycare centers, but we also have creches and daycare centers who have been registered and have started working within marketplaces, like in Mwanza. So the vendors or women business can have time for breastfeeding, they can have time to take a break and so forth. So we welcome you with that project. And that will be very helpful because it's going to link very well. Yeah, what we do.
Okay.
Last one, sorry.
Just one last comment. First, I had the mic. I hope it's still working. Very good program from Deloitte. Congratulations. One thing I actually want to add on it is sometimes it's not necessarily the fact that once a woman comes back from work to get access to these mentors and coaches and all that. Majority of the time is just the fact that they've been away from the system for just like 3 or 4 months or 5 months or 6 months. It is their own limitation, the fact that the world moves on so fast. Look at what he was talking about. Now we didn't have Putin in the equation. We need to change the whole thing. Everything moves so fast. So just to actually, the layer to add there will be that flexibility. And I think the world has learned within the era of COVID, just a woman to continuously choose to be engaged when she wants to, while she's actually, nurturing, her baby and all that stuff. So that's just an addition. But since you're just about to close, and there's one burning issue I wanted to add as my last comment. Here we are, we're talking about access to assets and economic opportunities. In the 4th industrial revolution, I think all of this is actually coming in within the digital world. And as much as, yes, we have some of these, really hard issues to solve, for example, issues of land. I don't know how long it will take to solve that, and social norm. But really we need to actually move our attention to really the opportunity that the digital economy is actually bringing, even to actually be able to solve these gender issues that we're talking about. We talked about digitization and the promise that is bringing, for example, in Tanzania, even into the lowest of the you know, people in Tanzania. We're talking about TASAF coming in and digitizing the cash transfers. What is that doing? That is basically giving a digital identity. Forget about the land. Yeah. You know, you're already coming in with a digital identity. You're starting to have the records. So you should be able to actually just leapfrog. And also on the other side, the promise of that digital, we talked about some of the core issues. We talked about productivity, women being behind. But the digital platforms, you know, once we have you know, full utilization of really the digital economy, we should be able to deliver some of this, you know, information, you know, network, connectivity, access to market, you know, by just leapfrogging and actually utilizing technology to actually be able to support some of these core issues we're talking about. I just was burning to say that.
Thank you for saying that. So we're going to go from copper wire to mobile in empowering women's identity in the metaverse. That's where it's all going to happen, in the metaverse. Please, could you give a hand to the panel here? Lots was spoken, so I'm going to leave it to Mara to summarize it and make it all make beautiful sense so that Dr. Chawla won't come again if all you're going to leave her with problems. She says she wants solutions. Yeah. So Mara, no pressure at all.
Yes, well, this is always the most difficult part of the morning, to try to summarize such a vibrant session as we've had today. So let me try to just pull together a few threads that came out to me as I was listening to the presentations, as well as, of course, to the discussion. Very briefly on the economic side, I think what we have heard today is that there is cautious good news on the economic side, but risks do still remain for Tanzania. Sound macro management has been crucial to get Tanzania to this point and as far as it has come, and it's important to keep that up. At the same time, increased proactivity to improve private sector investment, and especially to reverse the declining trend of FDI, will be really important for the country's economic resilience and economic growth going forward. And of course, also important is a continued strengthening of the health response on COVID-19. Let me turn then to our main topic of discussion. As I said at the beginning, and as you mentioned, Aylan, the purpose of this was to stimulate debate, so I think I could just say our work is done on this, and I'll go and sit down. But no, I won't do that. But it is delightful to see such a vibrant debate. We almost didn't get past the title of the top of the paper itself, which in itself I think was a very important discussion to have. Certainly, in listening to the debate about the word empowerment itself, I heard that it's important for us to think about the way that we use that word. The positioning of power was something that was said, is the important element here. Various alternatives were offered, advancement, support, and various others. I'm not going to choose one of them because I'm sure that will have equally a similar amount of debate. But I think what I would say on this is it's clear from this discussion that in substance we're all on the same page. Yeah. What we want to do is we want to see the women of Tanzania do well and to do their very best. And we want to find ways in our various roles to be able to support them to achieve that. Semantics are important, but the outcome is also a very important thing. The second, I think, takeaway for me is the reinforcement this is an agenda for the whole society. Samuel said right at the beginning, I am on this panel looking at all the women, but I think now we know from the discussion why you're on this panel, because this is not just an issue for women. It is not just an issue for women to do for themselves, it's an issue for society. And men and mentors of all types and varieties are very important for women's empowerment. I think every woman here would have somebody they can point to in their life who has helped them to get where they are. And it may be a woman, but it may also be a man. I know that in my case, probably the most one of the most crucial decisions of my life was to study engineering at a time, many decades ago, when female enrollment in engineering in my country was less than 10%. Now, it was my father who pushed me and suggested I should become an engineer. It was not a woman, actually, it was my father. So I know that that men are also very important mentors and provide very important leadership to women, and particularly to young adolescent women. We've also heard about laws and norms. We had quite a lot of discussion, and I think where I would come out on that is that both are important. I think it's very important to say that there are discriminatory laws against women here in Tanzania, as in many countries, and they need to be changed. And I think the government has a golden opportunity to take that agenda forward and to really move to make sure that the laws of the country provide a solid basis of equal opportunity for women. But at the same time, as we've heard, it's equally important to change societal norms. We know that the societal norms continue to drive gender-based violence. They continue to drive informal processes, even where women formally do not need the consent of a man. Often informally, they still need the consent of a man. So it's very important that society be able to change. And there was a very important point about education of boys and bringing boys up to accept a new Tanzania for Tanzania's women. We also discussed about how to advance women in Tanzania. And I think one of the things that came out to me very strongly is, first of all, to listen to the women, that they need to have agency for their own challenges and for the solutions. Another point that came out, I think, was that we need programs, not just products. But within the programs, the point that was made, I think, was very important, and that is that we also have to support women to participate in those programs. And that will require different types of support depending on the program itself, but also on who they are. So it may be childcare, or it may be running a business while a woman is taking training. But supporting women to participate in these more holistic programs is going to be the way to make progress. Also, we heard very strongly about the need to recognize the importance of the digital economy to this agenda and to deepen our understanding of it and the way in which we support the development of women's participation in the digital economy. I think our experience at the World Bank supporting a digital economy, as we do already, tells us that there is a paucity of official data on this. So it is actually quite difficult to diagnose some of the issues. And that was also raised by the panel. But in the projects that we're supporting with the government, we will start to support the government's ability to track gender disaggregated data in ICT. And there will be surveys done and other forms of data gathering that I hope over time will help us to better understand this and will help everyone to be able to better support the issue. Certainly, this session this morning has been an opportunity for us to learn and to listen. I think it's also been a great opportunity for our government participants also to hear and to learn from others. And we certainly are very committed to working together closely with the new ministry to be able to try to take forward this agenda. And at the same time, as many of you know, we do embed support for addressing gender disparity in every program and every project that we do and that we support here in Tanzania. And so we want to continue to deepen that work. I also want to make a couple of advertisements. So March, of course, being the month of International Women's Day, there's no coincidence that it happens to be March the 1st this morning. And we are launching now this special topic on our Tanzania Economic Update. But we also have some other things coming up, notably one of our important annual global reports, Women, Business and the Law, which surveys 190 countries and looks at the legal framework of gender equality in those countries. That will be launched this evening, Tanzania time. From Washington. There's a live stream, but the report will be available later this evening for those who are interested to see that global comparison that we do each year to look at progress on the legal side of gender equality around the world. The other two reports will be coming out later this month, and these are ones that also have been researched and written by our team here in Tanzania. One is the Tanzania Gender Assessment, and the other, the Tanzania Country Assessment on Gender-Based Violence. So the gender assessment is a broader version, a broader look at the issues to do with gender equality here in Tanzania than what we have focused on today. Today's focus as part of an economic update was on the economic side of the equation, but the gender assessment takes even more holistic look, and we'll touch on also many other areas of concern that we know of the ministry, many other areas that the ministry is looking to take forward. And as I said, as part of that work, we have also conducted a specific study on gender-based violence in Tanzania, because we believe this to be a very important issue that needs to be addressed proactively in the country. So the launch dates of those reports will be made public soon, but for those who are interested to continue to engage and debate with us, there will be opportunities coming up. So just to close, let me first of all thank very much our chief guest, Dr. Chula, for not only gracing us with her presence, also giving her insights and comments during the discussion, but also participating here with us for the session to be able to engage fully with the panelists and the audience. Let me thank our panelists. You were fantastic. It was a very vibrant discussion. We did definitely stimulate debate, so that was good. I think a very open, frank, and insightful discussion, which is exactly what we were hoping for. Thank you to our skillful moderator, Aidan. You somehow, without notes, I think, managed to take us through this discussion. So congratulations, and we'll have you back in the future, I'm sure. And also, of course, to all my World Bank colleagues, to Emmanuel and Jan for the work. They were the ones leading the writing of the report itself, but also for their presentations today. But a large group of World Bank people who've supported also the event today. So with that, let me thank everybody for your participation in this launch. It's been really a delight to be able to participate today and to hear the discussion. Very thought-provoking, certainly for me, and we will, I'm sure, take the ideas that we learnt today forward as we continue our work in Tanzania for Tanzania's women. Thank you very much.
Nothing more for me to say. Enjoy your lunch.